April 19th, 2026. Just before dawn in Shreveport, Louisiana, a tragedy unfolded that will leave an entire community and nations searching for answers. Authorities say 31-year-old Shamar Elkins allegedly carried out a devastating act of domestic violence that claimed the lives of 8 children. 7 reported to be his own, and 1 additional child. According to reports, 7 other children were found inside one residence. Another child was later discovered on a rooftop after reportedly attempting to escape the violence. 1 child survived after jumping from the roof in an effort to flee. Authorities also reported that Elkins critically wounded his estranged wife and another woman believed to be his girlfriend during this attack. The violence ended after Elkins fled the scene, leading law enforcement on a vehicle pursuit before ultimately being shot and killed by police. But before we ask how something like this happens, we have to ask why we continue to wait until Black women and children are dead before we take domestic violence seriously in our communities. Welcome to The Exit Cost. This podcast exposes the realities of Black femicide, intimate partner violence, coercive control, family violence, and survival within the Black community. This is not simply a conversation about crime. This is a conversation about patterns, the psychological, the emotional, social, and systemic realities that too often place Black women and children in danger, and the hidden costs many pay for trying to leave. Because leaving shouldn't cost you your life. I'm Ty Hollie-Love, and this is The Exit Cost, Episode 1. 8 is enough.
Police say the suspect shot a woman at one home and then drove to another house to unleash more violence.
The gray house is the house in which 7 children were located inside that were deceased. There was an additional deceased child that looked like he had tried to escape the residence out the back on the roof.
Officers say a second woman was shot and is believed to be the mother of the suspect's children. Both women are now in the hospital in critical condition. Officers fired at the suspect during a chase after he carjacked the vehicle at gunpoint.
When news of this tragedy broke, many people immediately asked one question. Why? Why would a father allegedly take the lives of children? Why would a man allegedly harm the woman he once claimed to love? Why would a family end up here? According to public reports, Elkins and his wife were reportedly separated and had court proceedings scheduled for the following day. Family members described him as distraught over the state of the relationship. And while the details of what happened inside that relationship may never be fully known to the public, one thing remains true. Relationships do not become tragedies overnight. Violence often escalates, control escalates, fear escalates, isolation escalates, threats escalate, and then one day everybody wakes up and are shocked by what has happened. The question is rarely whether there were signs. The question is whether anyone recognized the signs. Let's talk about this. Why don't we stop calling it mental illness every time a man kills his wife? Every time a boyfriend murders his girlfriend. Every time a woman is found dead after leaving a relationship, someone says, he snapped. He had mental problems. He wasn't himself. But what if we're asking the wrong question? Mental illness and domestic violence are not the same thing. Most people living with depression never hurt anyone. Most people living with anxiety never kill anyone. Most people living with schizophrenia never commit violent crimes. So why is it that when a man kills a woman, we immediately rush to diagnose the man instead of examining behavior? Because calling it mental illness feels more comfortable than calling it control. It feels more comfortable than calling it entitlement. It feels more comfortable than calling it abuse. It feels more comfortable than simply just calling it femicide. The story of Shamar Elkins is shocking. But the reality is that Black women being killed by men is not rare. Definitely not rare enough to shock us anymore. The numbers tell us that this is not just an individual tragedy, It is a community crisis. Take a look at this graph. Black women make up a minority of the female population in the United States. Yet they represent nearly 58% of pregnant homicide victims in this study. That means more than half of the pregnant women murdered in America were black. When we talk about maternal health, we must also talk about maternal safety. Because for some women, the danger isn't a medical complication. The danger is the person sleeping next to them. Black women are killed by men at approximately 2.5 times the rate of white women. And over 90% of black women were killed by men they knew, and they were killed using a firearm.
8 children dead and 2 women hospitalized in Shreveport. KSLA's Julia Daughtry is live at the scene on West 79th Street. Julia, what can you tell us about this recent arrest?
Jeff, the U.S. Attorney's Office released a statement saying that they have arrested 56-year-old Charles Ford for being a felon in possession of a weapon, as well as lying to agents about that mass shooting that happened on Sunday that killed 8 children. Now we're going to show a photo of the weapon ATF agents say was used in the shooting. Now, according to the ATF investigators, they say that they are not sure how the weapon got into Elkinson's hands, but what they can confirm is that at one point of time, Ford was in possession of the weapon and he lied to investigators about it, according to the United States Attorney's Office. After the shooting, ATF investigators started to look into the original owner of the weapon and say it was bought by a woman. And investigators spoke with the woman and she told authorities that she'd given it to Ford. And Ford, who is a convicted felon, does not have any permission to possess any firearms, and lied to ATF agents about having the weapon, then later admitted that he carried it under his seat. Now Ford faces up to 15 years in federal prison.
So here's the big question. Was it mental illness? And to be fair, there are reports that he had recently undergone a mental health evaluation through the VA and had expressed suicidal thoughts to family members, publicly posting about struggles with depression. But here's the question. Is mental illness the whole story? Because there is another piece of this story that often gets left out. Shamar Elkins was not completely unknown to the criminal justice system. Public records show that in 2019, he was arrested after allegedly firing multiple rounds from a firearm near a Shreveport high school. He later pleaded guilty to an illegal weapons charge and received probation. The incident reportedly occurred near school property and involved shots fired toward a vehicle. That matters because we now are no longer talking solely about a man who may have been struggling emotionally. We are talking about a man who previously demonstrated dangerous behavior involving a firearm. Bringing it back to the exit cost. For me, the most important question isn't was he mentally ill. The most important question is, were there warning signs? Because if a man has a previous weapons conviction, if he's expressing suicidal thoughts, if a relationship is ending, if there are ongoing conflicts, if access to firearms exists, then those are risk factors that deserve attention. Not because every person with those risk factors becomes violent, but because domestic violence fatalities rarely appear out of nowhere. They are often the final chapter of a story that began long before the news cameras arrived. Mental illness may explain part of a person's suffering, but it does not explain away accountability. And when we reduce every act of femicide to family annihilation, to mental illness, we risk ignoring the warning signs that could have saved a life the next time. The name of this show is not accidental. The exit cost. Because leaving often comes with a price. Women lose homes, women lose income, women lose support system, they lose family members who tell them to stay, they lose friendships, women lose peace. And sometimes women lose their lives. When we ask why she stayed, we often ignore everything she risked by leaving. The question should never be, why didn't she just leave? The question should be, what was the cost of leaving? because for too many women, the answer is terrifying. Tonight we talked about 8 children. But this story isn't only about 8 children. It's about every warning sign ignored, every threat that was dismissed, every woman told she was overreacting, every survivor who wasn't believed, and every family member who was forced to ask what they could have done differently. The goal of this show is not to be afraid. The goal is awareness. Awareness creates intervention. Intervention creates safety. Safety saves lives. And if this conversation makes even one person pay attention to the warning signs around them, then it matters. Here's my affirmation of the week. I deserve relationships rooted in peace, respect, honesty, and safety. I will not confuse control for love. I will not confuse fear of loyalty. I will not confuse silence for healing. My life has value and my voice matters. My safety is not negotiable, and I have the right to leave any situation that threatens my well-being. Here are a few books of the week that you're able to read to go along with the episode. Why Does He Do That? By Lundy Bancroft. The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. No Visible Bruises by Rachel Louise Snyder. Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman. And All About Love by Bell Hooks. Thank you for joining me for episode 1 of The Exit Cost. I'm Ty Hollie-Love, and until next time, pay attention to the pattern.